What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny Bush and Ian Harditz of PFF coming at you with our best offenses to target and some sleeper offenses to target. We all know that offensive output is important for fantasy football. We're trying to, nail down who are the best ones that you want to be looking for in your fantasy drafts and who are some offenses that could surprise people, that could be a lot better than we think. We think back to teams like the Chargers last year. They were a team that not a lot of people expected a lot of offensive output from. And they came out with Justin Herbert and really surprised everybody. So how you guys doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm glad we're talking some offenses. Again, we've been doing all these underdog stacks. Well, let's talk about which teams to actually target when organizing these offenses. So, Ian, glad to have you on. How you doing today?
Great day to be great, boys. Appreciate you having me. June 14th here, always down to talk some ball with some fellow diehards. And we don't got time for these other sports that are ejecting their MVPs for little ticky-tack fouls in the third quarter. Unfortunately, we had another just hellacious-looking dog, if you can even call it that, take home the Westminster Championship last night. But I've slept, I've gotten over it, and I'm back in my fantasy football mindset.
Yeah, for sure. Just talking quickly about that foul. Elimination game, you're going to eject the MVP like that. Just ridiculous. But anyways, let's focus on the best sport in the world, and that's football. And before we get into the first offense we're going to discuss, we're going to hit the intro on y'all. Okay, so let's start it off, Ian. Who is that number one top offense you're looking to target so far?
Maybe wouldn't say absolute number one, but offense I really like and you should be targeting is the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think everyone's kind of in on them being one of the, top 12, 15 offenses in the league. But we could legit be looking at what the Cowboys are to the NFC, just in terms of having this young, exciting quarterback. I know Burrow and Dak play the game differently, but someone that is going to win with volume. That was the thing with Dak. I believe when Dak was out of the picture, when he got hurt, he was first in the NFL in dropbacks, just like Joe Burrow was when he eventually got hurt. The news that we've gotten from Burrow, which we're trying to say he's going to be more limited mobility wise. I don't even think that was necessarily the be all end all quote. I think they were saying he's working his way back from a knee injury, so that could be a potential option, similar to the whole Saquon Barkley hoopla that maybe we'll talk about later. But for Burrow, O-line can't get much worse. You would think that these first-round picks they put in the group over the years will start to get a little better. They got some continuity there. So maybe we can go from a bad offensive line to at least a below average. We got Jamar Chase, the LSU connection. I mean, that's going to help. We see, Matt Ryan's to go down without Julio Jones, right? Now we're adding someone that a lot of people are trying to say could be the next big thing. So all signs pointing up for Burrow. And these wide receivers, man, like if there is going to be an offense other than the Cowboys to enable 3 top 24 wide receivers, I do think it could be Cincy between Chase, Higgins, Tyler Boyd. Right now, I'm getting the most of Boyd just because, he's the cheapest one of the 3, which is easy enough. And yes, I love Higgins. I love Chase, but they're the outside guys. Boyd's still in the friendly confines of the slot. We know Burrow already has a connection with him. His floor last year was outrageous, and it really has been over the past 3 seasons. So in situations like this, where it's a little bit confusing where the target share is going to go, what do we usually say? Take the cheapest option, and that is Tyler Boyd right now. But again, I think all 3 guys have the potential to be top 24 assets, and it's not like we're having to use, a top 15 pick to get any of them. So I think they're priced appropriately, and because of that, they're solid options. And then Joe Mixon, who was, I did come to bat for my boy yesterday. We had a certain news source just really just type in a brutal headline. We talk about clickbait from some of these sites, and they deleted it themselves later, so that's not just my opinion. Clearly, the higher ups at this website that should not be named agree as well. Basically, we've gotten 2 quotes from these Bengals coaches this offseason. Their offensive coordinator, Callahan, I don't want Mixon to leave the field, and I think he's up for that. And then Zach Taylor. This was the negative quote that Zach Taylor said. We aren't going to play him 75 snaps a game. Guys, Christian McCaffrey has played 75 snaps in 2 career games. He's not going to play 99% of every single game. Nobody does. That doesn't mean he's not going to have an every down role, because who else do they have to take those targets? Joe Mixon is their best option at receiver now that Giovanni Bernard's gone. And you're not taking on the same situation we have in past years. Everyone says, Michael Scott, I'm ready to be hurt again, GIF, every time we talk about Joe Mixon and all that. What do you mean like he's been a borderline RB1 his entire career. He was a PPR RB9 before injury. Like I've ranked him ahead of Jonathan Taylor because he has that potential to have every single, down role pretty much. Like Nyheim Hines is going to be getting targets. Like Jonathan Taylor is basically still stuck with his version of Giovanni Bernard. Does he have a better offensive line? Yes. Are the Colts necessarily going to score more points than the Bengals? I don't know. Carson Wentz sure didn't look like he was capable of that in the most recent sample we had. So, ultimately, Mixon only averaged 0.25 fewer PPR points per game than Jonathan Taylor last season. And now we're projecting him for potentially 50 more targets. So for me, Joe Mixon is a guy I'm coming away with in every single draft because he has that top 3 ceiling, and you can keep saying like, oh, we say this every year. Not really. We always had to worry about Gio and the scat back. Now the single source of targets that we used to have to worry about is gone, and it should all be with Mixon. So for me in this Bengals offense, Mixon is the one I'm prioritizing the most. I think Boyd makes a lot of sense. Burrow's fine. Once you get, if you happen to come away with, let's say, Boyd and Chase or Higgins in the top, 3 rounds, definitely be prioritizing Burrow at the end. And then, I wanted to go in on CJ Uzomah just a little bit because I think people forget just how good he was to start last year. 45 yards in week 1, 42 yards and a touchdown by halftime in week 2. And, we see someone like Blake Jarwin who played, couple snaps last year. He's actually now almost back to where he was ADP wise before last year. Problem is he's almost coming off an Achilles injury, and I just don't really like betting on guys coming back from that. So maybe he keeps the job. I don't think Drew Sample, did anything to suggest he's going to be the full-time starter. Uzomah's cheap enough, but I would say focus on the wide receivers and Mixon. And yeah, Cincinnati Bengals, people, let's ride.
Yeah, I'll quickly touch up on the pass catchers, and it's a great timing too, because just last week I was talking about my top sophomore breakouts, basically labeling a few of those receivers and Burrow, and I kind of just grouped T. Higgins and Burrow in naturally together, because when people talk about the Cincinnati offense, nobody talks about the fact that AJ Green is leaving behind 104 targets. People just want to automatically assume Jamar Chase is coming in. What about T. Higgins? What's going to have that effect on his overall volume? AJ Green turned 104 targets into less than 600 receiving yards last year. Can we just take in that level of inefficiency? I mean, we're talking about a guy in T. Higgins specifically who was on a near 1,120 yard pace when Burrow was in the lineup between weeks 2 and 11. I mean, this was an offense that was averaging nearly 41 passing attempts per game, and we saw them really operating as a high-flying, high unit. Joe Burrow showed last year that he is the type of quarterback that is able to support multiple receivers. Yes, maybe he's not a Dak Prescott at this current point in his career, but in terms of volume, in terms of what we should expect, in terms of efficiency, I do think Joe Burrow can be an easy top 10 quarterback, supporting, as you mentioned, potentially 3 top 24 wide receivers. Again, we're a little bit lower on Mixon, so don't shoot the messengers here, but overall, I do agree with the premise that specifically for me, these pass catchers and Joe Burrow, if you can secure Burrow with Higgins and Boyd, or Burrow with Chase and Boyd, or Burrow with Chase and Higgins, and then maybe later on, CJ Uzomah, as you mentioned, 18th round, I'm taking that every day of the week. So I fully agree. I think the potential of this Bengals offense could become nuclear, and in general, I'm always about betting on an offense prior to its breakout rather than a year too late before it gets too expensive.
Right. And Chase, to me, is the guy. He's the golden goose of this offense to me. I think this is the dude that could return all the value in the world. Danny just mentioned it. We're lower on Joe Mixon. As much as we might dump on his inconsistencies and the fact that most of the points last year that he got were in that one blow-up game that he had, he's still undeniably going to get one of the biggest opportunity shares in the NFL at the running back position. Not unlike what he did last year. Even when Gio was there, he was still 81% opportunity share, which was second in the NFL only to James Robinson. So this is a dude that if you're a volume, if you're a volume is king guy, then you're going to love Joe Mixon. I more so am a bit hesitant on the efficiency level of Joe Mixon and the fact that he's been a little banged up, and it's hard for me to stomach a coach coming out and being like, yeah, this guy's never leaving the field when he played 6 games last year. It's hard for me to believe, but nonetheless, he's still a guy that it's ranked inside my top, 15 running backs, and he's still very comfortably a second-round pick for me.
That's the thing with all these guys, like Cam Akers. Like we take these stands. I came out today. I'm like, I really do think I'd take Eckler over Kamara. They're both top 7 guys for me. It's not like I'm saying Alvin Kamara sucks. I'm not saying Jonathan Taylor sucks. He's like RB11 for me, but relatively compared to these other guys, we gotta try to figure it out. And yeah, I am a volume is king guy, so we are in lockstep, I guess would be the phrase.
I'll quickly mention that too. I'm glad that you said that you're an Eckler stan, because we can all support Eckler's greatness, and we can all support the West Coast Camara. So anyways, I'll get into my offense a little bit, and that's going to be the team behind Bush in the background right there. You can see all those jerseys. You got the Barber, you got the Evans, you got the Brady. I'm going to be talking about those Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it's crazy to me how much value at cost you're currently getting these guys for. I mean, you guys can see the ADPs on the screen, but right now you're getting Mike Evans in the 4th round, Chris Godwin in the late 4th round, even those 2 running backs, Fournette and Ronald Jones, going in the 9th, 10th round. And obviously on top of that, you got Tom Brady and AB as the main names in this offense. Let's just talk about it real quickly. But you guys can see that start of the season, 4 of their first 6 overall games come against teams that were in the bottom half of the league in terms of pass defensive efficiency. And we're still talking about a Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense last year that had the 10th highest pace of play and the 5th highest pass percentage in neutral game scripts at 62%. The thing that's always going to keep these guys' prices down is the narrative, too many mouths to feed, too many mouths to feed. Well, I actually tweeted this out a couple weeks ago. You guys can see it on the screen, but let's go through Brady's thought process, right? So Bush tweeted out initially, and I quote tweeted, but Brady he's sitting in the pocket. He sees, oh my 6'5", 240-pound beast of a receiver is open. Now I'll just force one into Tyler Johnson, Scotty Miller, Cam Brate. There's too many weapons in this offense to really force one to Evans. I mean, his touchdown rate of 13 touchdowns and 70 receptions has to go down, right? Like, people just cite negative regression all the time, without taking into effect that there are outliers. There is Mike Evans, the beast of a receiver who's put up 1,000 yards and basically 8+ touchdowns every single year he's been in the league. And people just want to fade him because he may not be the most volume dependent guy when he's returning so much value in the touchdown game. I know Corey is eager to get in on this as well, because Mike Evans has been his dude for the longest time. So you can take it away a little bit with Evans.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to fade Mike Evans because of the touchdown rate last year, right? We got to fade Tyreek Hill. We got to fade AJ Brown. We got to fade everybody who's efficient on their targets, because anybody who's efficient on their targets means that they're a elite wide receiver, which I believe Mike Evans is. He's in an elite situation where he gets schemed goal line end zone targets. Like, they specifically draw up screen passes and tunnel screens and fade routes for Mike Evans, and that's not going to change. They have the same offensive coordinator, same head coach, same quarterback, same weapons around him. That's how he's used. That's like, Chris Godwin's going to get more targets than him. I understand that, but Mike Evans is the guy that's going to get the valuable targets, the downfield targets, the end zone targets, and he's going to return value on any given week, because he can score 25 fantasy points on any given week with a long touchdown, with a couple red zone touchdowns. And Antonio Brown, we didn't even talk about him. He's going to be a guy that is probably one of those better and best ball guys that we talked about with Hayden Winks, because it's going to be hard to determine when Antonio Brown, when Chris Godwin, when Mike Evans get the touchdown that week or get the long play that week. But this offense is good enough that it's going to happen more often than not on any given week. And I would imagine 2 of these guys can fit themselves into the top 36 receivers on any given week that you look at. And like you said, they have a pretty favorable schedule in general. And some of the teams that are listed as, bit of tougher matchups have taken a step back in terms of their defenses. So I think this Buccaneers offense is set to be at minimum a top 5 to 7 offense, and could legitimately be, with everybody returning, with all the continuity that they have there, could be the best offense in the league.
I was going to say, like, they could get better somehow. Brady, even in that mid-season stretch where he wasn't hitting the, passes thrown 20+ yards downfield, he was like 0 for 18 in a row or something. It was never his arm strength. Like, his arm has always looked fine. Like, that touchdown he threw to Scotty Miller before halftime NFC Championship. Like, he looks like he's, 23 still, which is absolutely ridiculous. So with Father Time not looming, he now gets to go into his second year in a system that historically has caused his quarterbacks, Bruce Arians' quarterbacks, all kinds of problems. Like, one of my favorite stats going into last year was PFF had only had 3 quarterbacks have more than 40 turnover-worthy plays in a season. And it was Jameis, Andrew Luck, and Carson Palmer all in their first season, with Bruce Arians and Brady just being the complete freak of nature he is. Those 40 touchdowns, 4,600 yards, look like everything was just fine in that first year. So, yeah, man, it's, we're talking about Cincy and the Cowboys enabling potentially 3 top 24 wide receivers. I mean, this offense did last year, just in terms of PPR points per game. Godwin was wide receiver 15. Evans was wide receiver 16. AB was wide receiver 23. That's what, I mean, the disparity between ranking. I know people don't like Antonio Brown. He, by all accounts, not a great person. If we're doing that, then we can't draft Tyreek Hill. We can't draft a lot of guys for that reason. So taking all of that out of it, I mean, Godwin wide receiver 18 ADP. Evans, wide receiver 16. Brown is wide receiver 47. He is on the team. The knee is not an issue. Like, he's back. Brady loves him. We have a cool stat at PFF called threat rate, which is targets per routes. And number 1 last year, Devontae Adams. Number 2, for some reason, was Braxton Berrios. Number 3 was Antonio Brown. And like, Brady loves the guy. And whether you do, or, whether we do or don't, Brady does. That's ultimately what matters. So yeah, I guess I'm not off Godwin or Evans. I'm just not, actively trying to scoop them up because I think they're priced about right. Brown's the one guy in this offense I'm really trying to get. And honestly, maybe Giovanni Bernard as well. Like, I'm with you guys. They're going to put up a lot of points. Let's go get the cheap factors that still have a chance to actually rack up some targets.
Yeah, I'm quickly gonna say I'm glad you mentioned the AB. I mean, he's currently going off the board outside the top 40 wide receivers for a guy who's a top 24 wide receiver in points per game last year. Had a 43 reception, 483 yard, and 4 touchdown clip in the 8 games he played in this offense. Like, I don't understand it. This guy was averaging nearly 8 targets per game and over 60 receiving yards per game. Yet we want to fade him outside the first. He's currently going off the board about the 9-10. That's just insane to me, just to even think about.
Right. And when you look at all 3 of these receivers too, if any of them miss any time, then you have an immediate, extra level of ceiling that they can each hit, because especially for Godwin and Antonio Brown, who are going to play similar roles, if either one of them misses time, we're looking at guys that could average, 10 plus targets a game. And when it comes to the backfield, I've already been, firmly on the stand of it's Ronald Jones for me. He's the guy that is the primary ball carrier. I think the Gio Bernard signing hurts Leonard Fournette more than some people think, because that was the role that Fournette played last year, was the, the third down back somehow for Leonard Fournette. But that's the role he played. And Ronald Jones, to me, is the best ball carrier on that team. And I think when it comes to like best ball drafts, I think that's the perfect place to get any of these running backs, because I'd imagine on any given week, one of them is going to score a touchdown. The question is who. And you got the big play upside with both Fournette and Jones. They're both capable of breaking off long plays. We saw both of them do it last year. I think this whole offense is priced appropriately. I wouldn't say anybody's a huge value outside of really Antonio Brown, but they could all return value from where they're going. So if anybody has anything else on the Buccaneers, we can continue on them. But I'd like to move on to my next offense, if that's cool. We got the Baltimore Ravens, which is kind of a post-type sleeper, I would say, because they were first in the NFL in points scored in 2019, right? Clearly the best offense in the league, super efficient. Lamar Jackson wins the MVP. Mark Ingram's a top 10 running back. We have, Mark Andrews as a top 5 tight end. They bounced down to only 7th in the NFL last year, but it felt like a bigger drop than that. The Ravens felt like they got out to a extremely slow start. It seemed like they were completely out of sync. And when you look at what they did down the stretch, I touted them back in like week 9, week 10 as Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews being awesome trade targets because of how much their schedule opened up down the back half of the season. And you can see on the screen, 32 points per game from weeks 11 to 17. They were on fire down the stretch, and they got back to what made them good in 2019. I think what Greg Roman realized was that defensive coordinators are smart. You can't run the same offense 2 years in a row and expect the league not to catch up to you, figure out what you're doing, and figure out ways to limit Lamar Jackson's elite rushing ability. And they put this together down the stretch, like I said, and I think they're going to innovate this offense again. All they've talked about since the offseason started, since the draft, since free agency, balance, balance, balance. All they want to do is balance the offense. They took a first-round receiver. They took another receiver in the 4th round. They signed Sammy Watkins. It seems to me like they're not going to be a 410 pass attempt team. They're probably not going to be a top half of the league pass attempt team, but if they throw the ball 520, 530 times, which will still be like 24th in the NFL, I think we're not giving the passing game enough credit in this offense. Lamar's a better passer than people think, man. Everybody assumes because of his rushing prowess that he's a running back and he's a terrible passer. He's a bottom 10 passer in the NFL, but this dude's 1 year removed from leading the NFL in passing touchdowns, and he's been throwing to Willie frickin' Snead for 2 years. Like, he hasn't had any passing options, and I love Rashad Bateman. I'm sure, Ian, you love Rashad Bateman. Everybody loves Rashad Bateman. I think himself, along with, Tylan Wallace, who's coming in, and Andrews and Marquise Brown, who are already there. I think this offense, from a passing perspective, is going to surprise some people, and it's going to return more value than people think, especially early in the season. We talked about it with the Bucs, but they have the Raiders, Chiefs, and Lions the first 3 weeks of the season, and we all know how important those first couple weeks can be in the minds of fantasy players because we've been waiting for football all offseason. And if the Ravens offense comes out guns a-blazing, you're going to be able to sell those pieces high in a redraft league, in a dynasty league, whatever the case is. And if you don't believe in the offense long-term, and you can see the ADPs of the players, I love every single one of them at their ADP. The fact that you can get Lamar Jackson the 5th round is absurd to me. He should be clearly the QB2 in my opinion. him and Patrick Mahomes are, in my opinion, a lot closer than any of the other quarterbacks going in that range, including Dak Prescott, Josh Allen, and Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray. I think Lamar Jackson, to me, is the clear QB2. I know me and Danny have some disagreements there because he likes Dak a lot, but Lamar Jackson, to me, is one of the safest fantasy assets in the entire game, and he's super undervalued right now.
You mentioned liking all these guys at ADP. J.K. Dobbins, RB17 off the board in a best ball format is just so money in the bank. Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews going at the 61st overall pick, as you guys can see. I want to leave my drafts if I'm taking that Ravens stack with any three of those guys. You're talking about Jackson, Dobbins, Andrews, or Jackson, Andrews, and Bateman, or Jackson, Dobbins, and Bateman. I want my hands on this offense because talk about the Cowboys, talk about the Chiefs, talk about the Chargers being top 5 offenses. I think the one that, again, nobody mentions being there, as you mentioned, is the Ravens. Like, this is a team who was dominant down the stretch. Lamar Jackson was back to his 2019 form in those final 7 games of the season. Just because he had a quote-unquote slow stretch in the first 10 does not mean he's not the same dominant quarterback we saw from 2 years ago. And he mentioned if he gets any type of increase in terms of the passing volume, he mentioned 410 passing attempts last year, that's not going to repeat. He's not only going to throw the ball 410 times next year. If he does that again, the fact that he can still return value given his legs just is insane. So overall, when you're looking at Lamar Jackson as a quarterback asset, he is absolutely one of the safest players out there, period. Because in general, what he does with his legs and that increased potential in the passing game, Lamar Jackson is going to be an absolute beast there. And while I don't have him at 2, he's the clear 3 for me, honestly. What about you, Ian?
I have him at 5. He's in that first tier, though. I think it's him,
sure.
Dak, Kyler, Josh, and Mahomes. And honestly, the more I think about it, the more I do want to slide Lamar up because the single best version of Lamar we've seen has been the single best fantasy football player ever. And, you guys just brought up all the increases they've made at wide receiver. We should be expecting somewhat of a step forward as a passer. And it's the whole idea that he's not this good quarterback is just completely overblown. Top 15 over the past 2 years in PFF passing grade, big time throw rate, yards per attempt, QB rating. I mean, the one issue people like to bring up is what about deep passes outside the numbers? And okay, he's 28th and among 38 guys in PFF's grade. Matt Stafford's 21st, Drew Brees is 20th. Like, nobody's holding those things against them. It's just this, can't quite put my finger on what it could be. Some of these
it's stigma.
It's insults against Lamar. It's absolutely ridiculous. 62 passing touchdowns over the past 2 years. Maybe the guy knows a little something about throwing the football. I guess my question is why get anyone else? Because it's almost like, we see this when Taysom Hill was under center. And honestly, over the past 2 years, other than when Mark Ingram and Andrews were just kind of going bonkers with touchdowns, when you have a quarterback like this, I think it's the same thing with Jalen Hurts and Philly potentially. When you have a quarterback taking 150 rush attempts on their own, it's hard for the running backs, it's hard for the wide receivers, it's hard for anybody else to kind of get that volume. And the quarterback's a star. I get that. All in on Lamar Jackson. It's just elsewhere. Are we going to see any receivers on this team have more than 80 targets? I like Bateman. Watkins is there, though. Marquise Brown is not dead. Boykin there. Duvernay is going to be involved. There's a lot of wide receivers that's pretty muddled for, an offense that has been first in the NFL in rush attempts over the past 2 years. We're getting their usual offseason spiel. We want to do more in the passing game and, have this different look. I'm sure they will. Greg Roman's a smart guy. They'll change it to an extent. With that said, I guess I'm not overly optimistic in the volume for other guys. And that's like J.K. Dobbins. I mean, Dobbins is a stud. I'm a Columbus, Ohio lifer. I love that guy. He's one of the better. He just averaged 6 yards per carry. Only a handful of guys have ever done that. But yeah, Gus Edwards is there. And I wouldn't even be shocked if Justice Hill is shaving off some carries. And then we just come back to Lamar, where we just have oodles of evidence that having a mobile quarterback is not great for the running backs. Maybe it helps the yards per carry, but we don't having an extra 5-6 yards on your carries for over the course of the game isn't making up for the lack of volume and the lack of targets, which is the major issue. So for me, all the Lamar Jackson. Otherwise, in Baltimore,
I see it differently, and I understand because it makes sense because you're a big Joe Mixon guy. It's hard to bet on the efficiency over the volume because I think we can all agree that J.K. Dobbins will be one of the most efficient backs in the NFL last year. In fact, I tweeted this out a couple months ago, but J.K. Dobbins is the only rookie running back since David Johnson and Alvin Kamara to average over 6 yards per touch on less than a 50% opportunity share of his backfield. Ooh. And what we saw from those guys in their sophomore years is David Johnson finishes the RB1 in fantasy and Alvin Kamara be a top 3 running back. So I know everybody's concerned about the volume because Lamar Jackson takes a lot of it and Gus Edwards is still there. Dobbins specifically is a guy that I am going to own a lot if I can get him in the third round, because it's hard for people to imagine the uncertainty of a situation like that because the volume is scarce. And when you can bet on an efficient situation, that's usually like what fantasy came down to, right? Back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, when fantasy first started, they just picked the best players, right? And to me, Dobbins is already one of the best running backs in the league. I think he is a super talented player. He's my RB2 coming out of that class. And I think he's going to be super, super efficient in Baltimore next year. And the touchdown upside, as we've seen from Mark Ingram, he had 200 carries that year, and he finishes a top 10 running back because of that touchdown ceiling. And they don't use Lamar in that way. They use him in between the 20s as a runner, but they use running backs in the red zone for rushing touchdowns. So I really love this offense in general. I think all of them are priced, frankly, at their floors.
I just want more than 18 catches. That's the thing, man. If we can get those 10-plus touchdowns, that's great. But if he's still catching fewer than 20 passes, he's going to be disappointing us. So, hey, fingers crossed. Just make it if it's Dobbins and Gus, that's it. I think we'll be fine because Gus he's not going to be getting the pass down stuff. I just have this sick feeling in my, like Justice Hill last year, even when Mark Ingram was out, Hill was getting snaps. It wasn't a ton, but he was getting snaps. They've always liked him. Like he played the most snaps in that the 2019 loss they had to the Titans. And before they drafted Dobbins, we were like, hold on, why is Justice Hill coming off a 50% snap playoff game? So it's like Marlon Mack. It's like Carlos Hyde. Like, no, none of these guys are going to be fantasy factors, but their presence can hurt the actual fantasy factors in the backfield. So we want all these guys to have the Joe Mixon role. It's unfortunate Dobbins is not looking like he's going to get that.
That's definitely fair. So off of the top overall offenses, let's transition to potential sleepers. And the one that you listed here, Ian, I am extremely excited about because it does feature my quarterback too from this rookie class. So you can take it away with the Bears.
The Chicago Bears. Yeah. And, we were saying pre-show, I think you can pick any offense in the league. And if you're just, up to date on your research, you can make a decent enough argument for them being a sleeper. And the Bears, everyone other than kind of Allen Robinson is just being priced at their floor at the moment. Fields, I right after the draft, I ranked him as my number one redraft quarterback for this year because I thought, great, you guys just traded up for him. We'll be out there week one. So we have the same dual threat stuff as Trey Lance, but we don't have to worry about the depth chart. Obviously, now we found out that Matt Nagy's in love with Andy Dalton or something, so we got to worry about how long. Yeah, we got to worry about how long that's going to be going on. So I've come off that stance a little bit, but it's still possible. What they start with the Rams, like the over under for how long Dalton's going to be under center, man, I wouldn't put much higher than like 2.5 games. So Fields should be out there sooner rather than later. And once we get him out there, he's got that rookie rushing upside that we're looking for. And we've only seen 7 rookie QB1s over the past 10 years. And let me see if I can rip them off. It's been Kyler, Dak, Russ, Justin Herbert, Andrew Luck, Cam, RG3. I think that's them. Herbert was the
Trubisky.
Nah, he wasn't a QB1.
Oh, it's second year. My bad.
Yeah, he had some splash weeks in second year for sure. Not exactly with who was that? Oh, the John Fox year. That was horrendous.
Yeah. I think he was a top 12 quarterback that year too, if I'm not mistaken.
His second year he was a top 12 quarterback. When in Nagy's first season, he was a top 12 quarterback.
He was popping. Why was he? Because he was running around a lot, and he averaged like over 25 rushing yards per game. And with that group of rookies I just mentioned, like that was the 2 most common criteria. It was that they were runners in college, even guys like Andrew Luck. I mean, they averaged at least 25 rushing yards per game in college, and they were starting from week 1. Herbert was able to buck those trends week 2, and we saw he was much more athletic than he kind of put on tape at Oregon. And I think Fields, again, that's in his potential range of outcomes as a QB1 if he can get on the field early and run it like we know he can. And from there, like David Montgomery, I'm not standing him, but we were just talking about J.K. Dobbins. Like they're going right in that same area, and I think that's probably both of their floors if they don't get any of the receiving work, and if their offense, doesn't score a bunch. So I get why Montgomery's dropping. Tariq Cohen's gonna be back. We saw him average, 13 PPR points per game weeks 1 through 8, 22 in weeks 9 through 16. For some reason, Damian Williams is there. Like I don't love having the guy that his last game he scored 2 touchdowns and had over 100 yards in the freaking Super Bowl to now be our number 3 running back. Like he could have a small role. So I understand why Montgomery's being priced this way. hey, though, if they really like the way the offense was grooving last year and they just decide not to feature Tariq as much, then Montgomery is going to be a massive value at this point in the drafts. Again, I haven't come away with a ton of him, but this is an example of a guy being priced at his floor. Even with Tariq Cohen in the picture as a rookie, where he was not efficient, he did not look as good as he did last year, still had 267 touches, over 1,000 yards and 7 scores. So Montgomery is someone where if you come away with, these wide receivers, and I know we've been trying to stay away from this quote unquote RB dead zone in drafts, but if you are going to go for someone based on pure volume in that area, I think Montgomery has a case. Allen Robinson, being priced, I just think he's a little high right now. And as good as he's been at overcoming bad quarterbacks throughout his career, he is him, DeAndre Hopkins, and there's one other guy. Oh, Larry Fitzgerald. We've only had 3 wide receivers in the past 10 years get over 150 targets and not even return wide receiver 2 value. It was A-Rob and Hopkins in 2016 and Fitzgerald in 2012. Like, as much as Allen Robinson and Hopkins have overcome this in their career, we have also seen instances of them not having the sort of quarterback to enable that. I don't think Dalton and Fields are the worst QBs Robinson has played with, but it is, it's not great. We have two more quarterbacks for him to figure out, neither of which I would think we would suggest would be, an elite passer, at least in the year 2021. So it's just, more uncertainty. I would say Darnell Mooney is the guy that could just really rise up. If Fields is as good as a lot of people think he is, man, I think Mooney would have the biggest difference in kind of rank right now versus rank at the end of the year, because even though the sexy plays to pull from Mooney are, him just roasting Ramsey and then Carlton Davis, not getting a catchable pass, but, really great moves off the line of scrimmage to get open deep. But I thought the bigger, just kind of boosted confidence of him was the amount of screens they were feeding him last year. And we had games where he was just racking up design touches and receptions, and they did not bring in any sort of competition in this wide receiver room. So Mooney makes a lot of sense, I think, as a late round stacking option with Fields. And finally, Cole Kmet is someone that's not getting a ton of love because for some reason Jimmy Graham's still there. They can't trade him. He has a no trade clause. Rest assured. I mean, Ryan Pace, thank God you gave Jimmy Graham that. No
what was the point of that? Like,
I don't know, but
they cut their starting left tackle and their best corner instead of Jimmy Graham.
Well, and I was like, it's like a Jameson Crowder thing. Like, they're expected to cut him to save a good amount of money on the cap, but it was never this like June 1st issue. A lot of guys wait to do it, but like they can cut him whenever, and they just haven't yet. So I'm not sure. But either way, Kmet was already, playing an every down role at the end of last year. And Jimmy, as much crap as myself and some other guys give him, he's still a quality red zone target. But if he's out of the picture, Cole Kmet is going to be the guy that's really going to be leaping up draft boards, probably getting right into that Ferks or Troutman, borderline tight end 1 territory. So Kmet's someone we can still buy a little bit lower right now. And that's the kind of story with all these guys, other than Allen Robinson. When you can buy these players at their floor as opposed to their ceiling, it's good for the fantasy business. And as you kind of brought up at the beginning, Danny, like the 2018 version of this offense was some fun, and that was with Mitch Trubisky. So if Fields is as much better than Trubisky as a lot of people think, that's great news for everybody involved.
Yeah, I'll quickly say you mentioned Kmet. Me and Corey are both stans of Cole Kmet. I mean, we're mentioning a guy that we both have ranked in our top 12 overall dynasty tight ends. So in general, if you guys don't have Cole Kmet on your rosters, with the ambiguity, with the uncertainty of Jimmy Graham's corpse basically being there right now, this is the time to go acquire him. Because I'm telling you right now, they didn't draft Cole Kmet in the 2nd round last year to keep Jimmy Graham on the roster for the next 2, 3, 4 years. Like, no, go get Cole Kmet. He showed he was a decent tight end last year. He showed the snap percentage across the final weeks of the season. If they were to cut Jimmy Graham, we could be talking about a guy that's going to be a consensus top 14, top 15 ranked tight end in the industry. And he's currently going off the board right now. So the tight end 23, which just makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's my tight end 10 in Dynasty right now. Like, yeah, I already assume that he's going to be the starting tight end. We already saw him run more routes, take more snaps than Jimmy Graham down the stretch, like you mentioned. Like, this whole offense, to me, I totally agree with you. Price at their floor. David Montgomery is not going to have a top 3 ceiling at running back. He's probably not a talented enough player to get there. He's also probably not going to get the requisite receiving work now that Tariq Cohen is back. But his carry volume is going to be upwards of the best in the NFL. He's probably going to be top 10 in the NFL in rushing yards. And with Justin Fields coming in, that mobile threat as a quarterback, because I think Justin Fields is going to be borderline Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson level of a rushing threat. If he is that level of a rushing presence, he's going to draw defenders out of the box. He's going to make it easy on David Montgomery, and especially in the red zone, if they draw some plays up like what Kyler Murray and the Cardinals do, they're going to be able to get David Montgomery more touchdowns. And that's a thing that he's going to need, obviously, as a primary ball carrier, not a 3-down workhorse, is the touchdown volume. And I think that's something that we could see from David Montgomery. And Darnell Mooney, too. He's a guy that was spectacular against man coverage last year, according to Matt Harmon's reception perception. Wasn't the greatest against press coverage or zone coverage, but anytime you could see a 5th-round rookie come in and toast some premier NFL corners, they're gonna make people notice them, obviously.
And
so,
hey, do you know how much Darnell Mooney weighs?
Like 180 pounds, probably
76. And here we are with Devontae. Mere 10 pounds difference. We're worrying about it. I didn't see that weight making a difference when Jalen freaking Ramsey was put on skates. Come on, people.
Dude, I'm glad that you're a Devonta Smith lover too, because me and Corey have said it all the time. Like, these BMI truthers are just ridiculous. Can we stop with that?
Show me one play where it was an issue for him, and I'll consider.
Yeah, and the best example is the press coverage thing. It's like this guy was like the best in the country against press, like better than Chase in 2019. Like, it's crazy to me that's the narrative. Devonta Smith, I would not be shocked if Devonta Smith does what Justin Jefferson did last year.
I wouldn't be either.
It wouldn't shock me at all, because if we're going to use the BMI thing as an outlier, let's call Devonta Smith what he is. He's an outlier. He won a Heisman Trophy. Like, this is legitimately the outlier of outliers. If he doesn't work, then you can take your BMI shit to the bank. But if we're going to bet on one guy to break the BMI, this is the dude that we should be comfortable betting on. He has the draft capital, the physical talent, the route running, the intangibles. This guy's a freaking dog. He's smart as hell. Like, everything about Devonta Smith to me screams rookie of the year. Like, I can't get it out of my head.
Yeah, and quickly talking about that, one of his best comparables for me coming out of college, Chad Johnson, literally came out and said, all of you dogging on Devonta Smith for weighing sub 170 pounds don't even realize I was soaking wet 175 pounds for the majority of my career. Like, Chad Johnson himself said that.
He was taller than Devonta Smith.
And that was in the mid-2000s when there'd be an incomplete pass 10 feet over the guy's head, and he's still getting his head taken off. The hits that Chad Johnson took 20 years ago just don't even exist in today's NFL. So no, the comps, okay, there hasn't been other wide receivers this small. I mean, okay, let's see what happens now. Yeah, I'm with you guys. Let's go.
For sure. Yep. So all that love about the Bears, let's transition right now and let's go to one of the worst teams in the NFL last year, a team that had
Danny,
one of the
real
most
quick. Danny, real quick, just to cut you off because you're about to talk about the Jets. We got some news from Ian Rappaport. Jets and Jamison Crowder have finalized a renegotiated contract with plans to keep him on the team through 2021. So the cut that we all thought was happening.
Elijah.
Apparently the Jets, even though they have the 3rd most cap space, they made their best wide receiver over the past 2 years take half of his salary. Damn shame. Come on, be better, New York.
And I was just hoping that was a leverage move to get my boy Elijah Moore some more snaps. But anyways, talking about the Jets,
gonna need it the way he's performing in camp.
Yeah. Some breaking news. Let's go into the team, though. And the main acquisition this offseason that really intrigues me before I get into all the players, before I get into the schematic change. Well, actually, going to talk about the schematic change. Mike LaFleur getting brought in. Let's talk about it real quick, because Adam Gase has just become one of the absolute memes of the fantasy football industry, how he ruins every single offensive piece he touches, apart from Jamison Crowder last year, which was, I don't even know what that was.
Jarvis Landry a few years ago.
Just loves his slot receivers, am I right? But anyways, talking about that Jets offense, what we've seen Mike LaFleur do under Kyle Shanahan, again, Shanahan's going to get all the credit, relatively so. I agree to a certain degree. But Mike LaFleur is that disciple. And when we're talking about that 49ers offense last year, we're talking about a team that ranked 12th in passing yards and 21st in scoring, despite George Kittle and Deebo Samuel missing time and their starting quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, missing the majority of the season. When we're talking about this team, this scheme, rushing the football in recent years, the 49ers have consistently been a top 10 rushing offense over these last few years and haven't really had that feature type of back in memory. I mean, we're talking about Tevin Coleman, we're talking about Jeff Wilson, we're talking about Jerick McKinnon in the past. They haven't had a featured back, yet they've still been able to produce that type of level of production because they've been rotating these guys in and out. I mean, this can only bode well for a guy in Michael Carter, who I think fits that inside zone scheme tremendously. I mean, we're talking about a wide zone scheme right here that Michael Carter in college 72 of his 156 runs came on those type of plays. We're talking about getting him on the edge. We're talking about getting him in space. We're talking about, in general, letting him hit those gaps full speed. Michael Carter was able to do that at tremendous efficiency in college. One of the highest rated running backs, according to PFF, in terms of elusive rating in these past couple years. I mean, we're talking about a run scheme that should benefit all of those running backs, and in particular, Michael Carter, who we talked about on the rookie episode. The Jets were looking at, if they had that third round pick, they were planning on using it on Carter all the way. And Robert Saleh himself basically said the fact that we were able to get Michael Carter at the top of the fourth round, the whole room was buzzing. The whole room was pumping their fists. The whole room was excited, ecstatic to get this guy in that scheme. And I think he's going to have a baller type of year. I mean, we're talking about a guy who was my RB4 going into the draft, lands in a scheme where he can really, truly maximize his potential. I like that fit in that current RB32, 87th overall ADP. I'm willing to take the chance on him at that current price. But now we get into the passing scheme. And now we get into the golden boy himself, number 2 overall pick in Zach Wilson. And I know you tweeted this out a couple weeks ago, but Zach Wilson was the number 1 ranked quarterback in the class on play action with a 156.1 QBR and a 17-0 touchdown interception ratio. And he actually ranked number 3 in this class on pass rating on outside bootleg type of plays. Mike LaFleur's passing offense in San Francisco has ranked top 10 in both of those since 2019. So we're getting a quarterback that perfectly fits Mike LaFleur's intended scheme in overall on the Jets. And we're talking about those weapons. We mentioned Elijah Moore. We mentioned signing that Corey Davis. I talked about Corey Davis as an early sleeper video a couple weeks ago. But in general, we're looking at a guy who posted similar efficiencies to what we saw from Stephon Diggs just 2 years ago prior to getting dealt to the Bills. Now, is he going to turn into Stephon Diggs? Probably not, but at his current price tag going outside the top 40 wide receivers, why wouldn't you give a chance on that? So overall, you guys can see the ADPs on the screen. We're getting Zach Wilson at quarterback 25 price, Michael Carter, RB 32, Corey Davis, wide receiver 51, or mentioned Elijah Moore. My wide receiver 4 in the class, a guy that they spent an early second round pick on, is going off the board as the wide receiver 59. I mean, this is just a completely undervalued offense right now because people want to focus on the stigma of them being the Jets. This is not your 2020, 2019, 2018 Jets. This is a team that will put up points, that will run at fast pace, and will be able to be an exciting young offense to cheer for the foreseeable future, starting in their rookie season. So take advantage of this ADP right now because you don't have to spend a single-digit pick on any one of these guys in this offense right now. You're currently getting all of them in the 10th round or later.
How are you going to go through all the Jets and not even mention my guy Herndon?
Oh, I was going to mention him too. You're mentioning the scheme.
I'm hurt. Scheme. We got Kittle. We got Kittle 2.0. No, I'm just playing. We'll see. I mean, they didn't add anyone. Chris Herndon used tight ends. Like
yeah, I was going to quickly say this coaching staff knows how to use tight ends. Talking about Salah, talking about like LaFleur. I mean, we saw Kittle, 5th round pick a couple years ago, end up being one of the best tight ends in the league. While he may not be a tight end 1, perhaps he could have some absolute spike weeks, and you're getting him currently off the board as what, the tight end 28 right now, 207th overall pick. So yeah, Chris Herndon is definitely a great shout, especially if you're trying to complete those stacks at the back end of your drafts.
He's still on the team. We got that going for us. They haven't added other tight ends. You know, I wake up every single day and just pray Zach Ertz has not been traded to the Jets yet. And because of that, every reason that I was in on him last year still applies this year. And that basically came down to the fact in 2018, when he was a rookie, he was making plays on a week-to-week basis. I mean, only this is the group of rookies that have averaged at least 8 yards per target with a minimum 50 targets at tight end. Because usually we see nothing out of rookies at this position. But in this group, it's Herndon, Mark Andrews, Gronk, Hunter Henry, Heath Miller, Aaron Hernandez, Noah Fant, Jordan Reed, Zach Ertz, George Kittle. Like efficiency-wise, he was great as a rookie. 2019, he was hurt the whole year. Last year was last year. My goodness, was not great. But we also didn't see these instances of Herndon, getting 8 or 9 targets and just not doing anything with them. They were using him to pass block for like a higher percentage of the snaps than pretty much any other tight end out there. So we can now get him even cheaper than before. And unlike their wide receiver room, it seems a much more clear-cut situation. So I'm willing to be wrong on Zach Wilson. We've had some of these quarterbacks drafted over the past few years, Herbert, Josh Allen, Daniel Jones, where they've almost been written off immediately. So no, I want to see this dude play preseason, regular season, and we'll see what happens. So I'm not saying he is going to bust. Now, with that said, compared to the other, first round QBs, I would say just his lack of competition, just maybe not quite having the size to hold up, just with that, playground style he plays. If he's great I would be so happy because he is so fun. He was so fun to watch at BYU, and like that, just his style of play would be so. If he can pull it off against professional defenders, man, fair play to him. I am just a little more concerned about it, and I think that's why he is falling down compared to the other rookie QBs. But yeah, another situation where they're all priced cheap. It's just between Corey Davis, Mims, Keelan Cole, Crowder, Elijah Moore. Like it's now we're looking like Baltimore, where I just don't know who is going to be getting these targets. At least there should be a higher passing ceiling of ball for everyone.
Right. And everybody knows that I was like huge on Zach Wilson. So Zach Wilson to me is like, I compared him to Kyler Murray. I don't think he's quite the athlete that Kyler Murray is, but the style of play that I saw from Kyler Murray at Oklahoma is what I saw from Zach Wilson at BYU. And we always talk about it on this channel. I'm a nurture over nature guy. And I think the nurturing environment that the Jets have brought in their new coaching staff, I love everything that they've done with, trading up for Vera Tucker and getting him a great wide receiver in Elijah Moore and, building that offense around Zach Wilson. I have less concerns as if he would have went to the Jags, where I don't know what the hell Urban Meyer is doing. So I really love the Jets situation long-term from a dynasty perspective. And for redraft, Zach Wilson to me is a guy that I think could come along at the end of the season and be honestly a league winner by the end, because the style of play he plays is meant for big spike weeks and things of that nature. And Elijah Moore, man, like if you guys follow Connor Hughes on Twitter, he's like the Jets athletic beat reporter. Like he's comparing him to Antonio Brown every day, saying he's unstoppable in the red zone. Like this dude's wide receiver 59 ADP ain't going to last very long, because this guy is getting hyped up like crazy right now. And rightfully so, because he's a freaking stud. He produced behind DK Metcalf and AJ Brown as a freshman. So all that being said, let's move on to the next team. I got another AFC East team that's a bit of a low-key sleeper and more of a value necessarily than a team that could return, a huge ceiling. But I actually really like the Patriots as an offense that is going to return some value. Last year, the Patriots were a bottom 5 unit, right? They were a terrible offense. They had very little fantasy value in general. And they're still kind of carrying that stink around them with their players and their ADP. The most expensive player in ADP for the Patriots right now is Damian Harris, who's barely a 7th rounder. And this team brought in a lot of additions to help solidify their team in general. And obviously they had all their opt-outs come back from a year ago. And they brought in 2 premier tight ends in free agency, a pretty solid deep threat in Nelson Aguilar, who took a step forward in his career in Las Vegas last year, a decent slot guy in Kendrick Bourne, and honestly, left tackle to right tackle, this might be the best offensive line in the entire league. I think at every position, they have a plus starter at minimum. And that's not something you could say pretty much about any offensive line in the entire league. Everybody has a weak link, not the Patriots. Whoever starts at quarterback, my guess is it's going to be Mac Jones sooner rather than later, based on everything that we're hearing. I think whoever starts at quarterback should be a viable streamer and good enough to support the guys that I actually care about in this offense, namely Damian Harris, Nelson Aguilar, and the tight ends, as deeper plays at their respective positions. Well, I don't think this can be a top 10 offense necessarily. I think they're going to return a lot of value from where they're going. You're getting Damian Harris right now as RB31. I think this guy is an RB2. I legitimately think the rushing volume he's going to see is going to be comparable to guys like David Montgomery and Josh Jacobs. I legitimately think he's going to get that type of share of the rushing volume in his offense. And we know the Patriots, over the last 2 years, only the Saints and the Patriots are rushing the ball in the red zone at a very, very elite level clip. And Nelson Aguilar showed last year that he can be that deep threat for an offense. He's not a slot guy like Philly tried to pigeonhole him into be. And I think he's a guy that's set to see pretty much a monopoly on that area of the field's targets.
I mean, it sounds like Sony Michel is actually a cut candidate. And even more importantly, I think it's going to be Mac Jones sooner rather than later. For them to draft someone with such a different skill set than Cam, and Cam's deal is just so full with incentivizations and stuff. I think it's going to be Mac sooner rather than later. And with that in mind, and if Sony's gone, now Damon Harris loses his primary early down competition, with all due respect to Ramondre Stevenson hives out there. But Cam Newton, man, he had 19 rushes inside the 5-yard line last year. Only Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, and Kenyon Drake had more. I mean, that was kind of almost the issue in San Francisco. When we were thinking they were going to have Mac Jones, that was really good for those running backs, for Kittle, for Ayuk, for Debo. Going to someone like Trey Lance, the same thing I was talking about with Lamar and Jalen Hurts. When you have that quarterback soaking up that much of your rushing attempts, it's not great for anyone involved. And we kind of saw that in the Patriots offense last season. I mean, Cam, I think, was still, dude couldn't throw for 10 passing touchdowns, but he was still like a top 17, 18 fantasy QB just because of all that rushing usage. So yeah, Damian Harris is someone that's going way undervalued. And, you know, we'll see what turns out with everyone else. I saw some Jacoby Myers hype the last few days. I guess the other guy I'd be willing to take a shot on is Nelson Aguilar, because he was legit good with the Raiders last season. And, you know, people just want to always bring out that dropping babies meme, which is funny, and I get it, but just realize, like, the guy has made a lot of plays over the past few years. We have an example of him in this Eagles Super Bowl run, working as, you know, a really dynamic slot, a yak guy. And then with the Raiders last year, he was one of the better deep threats in the league. So maybe, just maybe, puts it all together and, you know, really boosts off. But hey, I don't even think his ADP is in the top 50 right now. So Aguilar would be the guy from the passing game I'd want the most exposure to. The tight ends are just tough. I'm not sure which one's going to be it. We've only seen, it was the Patriots in 2011, I think, with Gronk and Hernandez. They were both top 4. And then Ertz and Goddard in 2018 were both top 12. Those are the only instances of 2 tight ends, both being top 12 fantasy assets. I will give a slight lean for Jonnu because, guys, he might get like 10 to 15 rush attempts this year. It's not out of the equation. Belichick has already referenced he actually can run the ball. If you go back some of those Hernandez games over the years, man, they were using, basically, I'm trying to think of what they would call it in NFL terms, but it was 4 wide receivers and 1 tight end with Hernandez just lining up in the backfield. So Jonnu offers that type of versatility, and if the touch count's going to be a little bit similar between him and Henry, I'll give the edge to Jonnu.
Yeah, for sure. Let me talk about those ADPs right now, because at their current values, it's just ridiculous. I mean, you're talking about Damon Harris currently going off the board 84th overall at RB31. Nelson Aguilar is the wide receiver 61 off the board. And then you talk about Mac Jones starting sooner rather than later. He's currently going off the board as the quarterback 34 or undrafted in most underdog drafts, which is just insane to me. Because, I mean, we're talking about Mac Jones in terms of this potential fit into the Patriots offense. Mac Jones was second in the nation last year with over 22% of his total attempts coming from RPO/read and screen situations, according to Sports Info Solutions, and was second in play action passing rate in Steve Sarkisian's offense in college. The Patriots show that they're adept at really game planning that type of offense. 57 of their total 440 pass attempts came in those type of situations, which was the 7th most RPO pass in the league and 13th most play action passes, despite having the 2nd least total passing attempts in the league. So overall, when you're looking at that RPO rate, 13%, that was the 4th highest rate in the entire NFL. Mac Jones will come in, fit that system, exactly what they're looking for. And you mentioned that those 19 goal line opportunities from Cam Newton, those are going to be dispersed. You're talking about Damon Harris. You're talking about Jonnu Smith/Hunter Henry being potential goal line options in terms of being big body tight ends. This is a team that, in general, without that presence of Cam Newton in the red zone, is going to disperse more volume and more value to those other ancillary weapons in the offense. So I fully agree. Get Mac Jones in there. I want those weapons to thrive.
Mac doesn't run. We don't need him. We'll take the other guys.
There we go.
I think Mac, though, he can support those guys. And on the tight ends, man, I'll just take Jonnu and hope that Hunter Henry gets hurt, because Hunter Henry always gets hurt. But, man, Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, to me, they seem like they're going to lead this team in targets. I don't know why. I think that's just how they're going to design the offense. And you're right. It is a very rare situation. We've only seen it twice in the last 10 years or so. But I do think these tight ends are going to be more valuable than people are initially thinking now. Everyone's just kind of the amount of money that those guys commanded have to demand that they're going to build the offense around those dudes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So if you guys enjoyed this, go ahead and, I'm sure you already follow Ian Hartitz on Twitter. If you don't, he's got, tweets out some great information, tweets out some memes, tweets out some Chris Herndon love. You get a little bit of everything with him. And by the way, if you didn't know this, Ian, our #1 viewed video on this channel has Chris Herndon on the thumbnail. And it was a top sleepers video that I did in September of last year.
Bring him back for this one.
Yeah, I might have to. If we get some positive reports, I'll just run with it like all Chris Herndon truthers always do. So if you guys enjoyed that, comment, subscribe. Make sure you guys follow all of us on socials. Join the Discord, totally free to do so. And you can talk football all the time with a bunch of dedicated football fans. And a quick shout out to, I'll let Danny do that because I forget the guy's name.
Yeah,
but
a quick shout out to Sports Cards HQ in the Discord. Completely helped me revamp that Discord, make it more organized, make it more clean, make it a more enjoyable experience for you guys. So tell him I'll shout him out. Gotta shout him out. He did a great job organizing that entire Discord for us.
Yeah. And if you guys made it to this point in the video, comment down below Chris Herndon, Truthers Forever.
Yes. But
All
anyways,
right,
with that,
peace out and enjoy your Thursday.